Frederick motorists are seeing an increasing amount of speed cameras springing up on streets outside schools, along with cameras at intersections to catch red light runners. Please explain your support or opposition to this program.
For the red light cameras, I'm not at all in favor of those. I would like to see that contract be done away with and all the red light cameras taken down. One of the reasons I feel that way is I happen to work at State Farm, the place that hopefully will be around 5 years from now, not give the next administration a headache. But I talk to a lot of people because I investigate accidents in addition to going down to lobbying in DC sometimes. And the red light cameras oftentimes, from what I've heard and people I've talked to, do cause more harm than good. You have people slamming on their brakes, and people are slamming into the back and slamming into the back. It's not a phenomenon that happens all the time, and to be quite honest with you, the idea of red light cameras I don't like. I've talked to the police department. They can have officers out there that will not impact the current staffing levels, and they can do that. Because when you get a red light camera, you can appeal it, you can sign an affidavit saying that I was not in the car, but your judge, jury, and executioner is a camera. I don't like that. So yes, I would like to see the red light camera go. I'm not in favor of the speed cameras either, but I know why we have them at the school zones. We do need to protect our citizens, especially our children. But to be quite honest with you, I'm willing to have a conversation about the speed cameras, but I'm not in favor of those either. A few days ago, I was down in Montgomery County, and that was frightening. About every 20 feet, and I'm not joking, past Gaithersburg, there was another red light camera, another speed camera. I don't think we need the red light cameras, and I'm willing to discuss the speed cameras, certainly.
Thank you very much. Anybody else care to speak to the question? I see you being cautious. Very good. All right, Mr. Imhoff, you're up next. The city's fiscal 2014 $135.9 million budget, which includes about $90 million for the operating fund, was passed earlier this year with money for pay raises and other initiatives. What priorities do you envision for the fiscal 2015 budget should you be elected?
2015 budget priorities. The first thing is that I can think of is finding the technology that we can use within the city government to make it more efficient and hopefully reduce the overall cost of operating the government. Second thing would be to take a look at where we can spend the money that would encourage economic development around the city, not just in one place, but around the city. We have multiple neighborhoods that need assistance in revitalizing their neighborhoods. And I think the third thing would be to take a look at where we can find the extra cash to pay down some of our debt sooner than later.
Very good. Thank you very much. Would anybody else care to speak to that question for 30 seconds? Ms. Nash.
So I think this might be a little unpopular for a Republican primary, but I'd actually advocate for additional code enforcement officers, actually additional staff in the city of Frederick budget. I think there's definitely a need. I think that the code enforcement officers who are there now are sort of taking a reactive approach, and I think that if we added some customer service sort of surveying and some performance metrics, I think that we could be a little bit more effective there and just, probably not for that much money, but make a big difference, big impact.
Thank you very much. And also we have Mr. Schmidt at the end, 30 seconds.
I say one of my priorities would be business incubators. What I find in my business a lot is I'm going and you meet somebody who's a really good plumber, but they don't understand the business working aspect of it. I think that we can be investing in some entrepreneurs here in the city, again, it's that ingrowth, that we can be investing in them to create those businesses here in the city, and so that instead of them building up their skills here, working in a trade, and then moving somewhere else and starting a business, and they start it back here. So I want to invest in business incubators.
Very good, thank you. Last call. Very good, moving on. And we are going to go to Mr. Dacey. You take our next question. The final touches on redeveloping Carroll Creek Linear Park have stalled because of state and federal requirements and higher than expected bids, the mayor told us in his State of the City speech. As one among five, first tell us your level of support for moving this project forward and how you envision this final phase turning out.
Well, I think it's critical to finish Carroll Creek. I think Carroll Creek should be the jewel of Frederick. It really should be a place like Times Square in New York. I really think that when I take people to Carroll Creek, they're always impressed. I think it could be more impressive. Part of the problems with Carroll Creek, I think everybody's familiar with, there's a lot of crime, there's a lot of perception that there's a lot of crime on Carroll Creek. One of the things I'm advocating is a zero tolerance policy against crime. I think we have to set the economic conditions such that, or set the conditions such that it can develop economically. My wife works a block away from Carroll Creek. I asked her if she would go down to Ben & Jerry's after work and get an ice cream, and she said absolutely not. There's just too many vagrants, there's too many problems down there, people hanging out up to no good. And so what New York did, New York was able to do through a zero tolerance policy was to crack down on those nuisance type crimes such as public drunkenness and harassment, and really it made a huge difference in being able to economically develop Times Square. And I'd like to see a similar thing occur in Carroll Creek. I think that second phase of Carroll Creek is extremely important. I think that McCutcheon's is waiting until the city makes that investment in order to make its investment. There's a number of businesses that want to invest on that side of Carroll Creek, but are unable to because the conditions are not right now. We need that zero tolerance policy in order to make people feel comfortable walking downtown and being patrons of those shops. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're not jumping around too far though. We're going to take Mr. Cowell next. Mr. Cowell, public safety is a perennial concern for municipal governments, and nowhere is that better typified for city residents than in the Frederick Police Department. We'd like to know where in your priorities supporting the police department falls. What are the main problems you believe are facing the department, and what's your approach to fixing them?
Right now, I believe that the size of our city, we have we have a police force that's under the size that I recommend. I would like to have more employees hired on the force. I'd like to have more foot patrols, potentially a substation along with the new Walmart that's going to be built on West 40. I support the police officers. I support what they're doing currently with proactive policing, with the technology, data planning, etc. And if the chief came to the board and I was on the board, I would definitely support anything that they needed.
Very good. Would anybody like to speak to that question? Okay, we'll take it. I actually jumped over asking whether anybody wanted to speak to the Carroll Creek Linear Park question. Did anybody want to use that 30 seconds on that? A few. Okay, good. Mr. Imhoff, if you'd like to speak to that question, please go ahead.
Yes, with regards to the policing, I think Chief Ledwell is doing an excellent job. I just had a chance to talk with him at length this past Sunday during the last concert in the park. And he's got a number of initiatives underway already to improve how the police force can be covering the neighborhoods necessary to mitigate as much possible potential problems as possible. The biggest thing is supporting them, as I did in the past, with technology, giving them the opportunity to buy the technology to equip their cars and their persons to do their jobs better.
Very good. Anybody else? Yeah, the take is great. Okay, Mr. Schmidt, the next question goes to you. There's no formal restrictions on the books, but should the city be able to limit what kind of businesses locate in the downtown area to preserve its history, uniqueness, and charm? What are those limits, or should it be a free-for-all?
There was a study done about bringing in kind of chain stores down to downtown. I'll tell you what they found was that this is something you see a lot. Somebody will go to a Starbucks because they know that there's a Starbucks, and they'll go downtown and they'll go visit a little boutique or another shop next door that they wouldn't have gone to before. I think there's absolutely a place for those kind of businesses. I think it's very important that we maintain the way that the Frederick City looks. So I think it's very important that we have this historic, and this is why when people come, they enjoy the kind of that small town feel, even though it's a city. And I think it's important we keep that, but I think that there is a place absolutely for us to bring in some chains and some retail stores that have a bigger name to create more economic movement downtown. It's the driver of our city. I think we focus a little bit too much on it when we talk about planning and growth, but it is very important that those businesses are employing a lot, especially the younger people as they go to college and FCC. It's very important that we help them out. So I think that though we need to make sure that we retain the character of the city, that there's a place for, as I said, retail kind of chain stores. I think there's a place for it.
Would anybody else care to speak to that question? Bearing in mind we only have one more question left, so if you're sitting on your hands, you better hope for a good one at the end. All right. Then the next question, and our final question on this round, goes to Jill King. Jill, with the city slated to grow up to a third more in the next 2 or so decades, governing Frederick will only become more complex. Isn't it time for the Board of Aldermen to become full-time with a commensurate pay raise to better represent city residents? Or maybe we should consider aldermanic districts? And should the board have its own legislative staff? Feel free to disagree, but if you do, what's so good about the present system?
With us slated to grow in the future, it is important that we realize that our jobs are increasingly becoming more and more for the citizens, and there's more citizen contact now than ever with the internet. There's multiple ways of contact. The aldermen now, I know I've probably bugged some of them quite a bit, and with suggestions and comments, and I know if I'm doing it, there's many others doing it. We will have to grow as far as a pay raise and full-time employees. I don't think that we're ever going to get to that, not in my lifetime, but sooner or later it is going to have to be looked at. We are comparable across the state right now as far as the pay rates go. And when it was brought in, it was a little early, of course, when they raised the pay rates for the mayor and the Board of Aldermen, because we weren't quite there yet. When we grow, we do have to keep re-looking and re-evaluating at everything that's going on and see if there's a need. If it's not immediate, don't do it. Just wait and keep re-evaluating, knowing your situation, and know when to do it. You can't do something expecting another thing to happen. You have to do it as the flow goes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we do that, if you do take a photograph, please turn your flash off. It's very distracting for the candidates, okay? Thank you. Okay, so who would like to take their 30-second chance? That'll be Mr. Dew. Anyone else? Nope? Then it's all yours.
I would say, God knows, the last thing we need are more full-time professional politicians. I think what makes everyone on this stage so special, and the Democratic stage last night for the Board of Aldermen, is that we are not politicians. We are people. We're mothers. You know, we're lawyers. We're bankers. We work for State Farm. This is who we are, and we are powerful. We're able to do things because we go to our job during the day and then we serve the people. That, when you have full-time politicians like that, they forget that connection. And I'm not going to go knock on someone's door and say, I'm sorry, we have to raise your taxes. I need to be full-time. No.
Thank you very much. That brings us to the end of our second round. We'll now speed on to our next general question, and this time we're going to take Mr. Schmidt at the end of the table first. You have 1 minute and 30 seconds. If you live in Frederick County, the topic of development is never too far away from our office holders. Over the next few decades, Maryland's second largest city is set to add another third to its population. The policies and decisions about annexations and development made now will be critical to managing that future expansion in a way that is sustainable. In broad terms, tell us what your approach to managing that growth and development will be over the next 4 years.
All right, well, I covered a lot of this before, but you know, growth is going to happen. It's a good thing. It's a healthy thing for any growing city. And more importantly, as we annex properties, that means people want to live here. So it's a good thing. But you know, I talked about infill. I think that needs to be our focus over the next 4 years, is growing it inside the city. We want that highly skilled workforce. But as I said, annexations are going to happen. If we are going to annex something, it's very important that we have a very thorough economic impact study. We can't have another Hargett Farm. If we're going to bring anything into the city, I believe that it has to have it needs to be an immediate revenue generator, that we can't bring on anything that's going to be draining our resources. You know, most importantly, and this is a strength of mine, as we annex things, we need to be looking into that large-scale macro future. and making our decisions based on that future, not based on, oh, it'd be really cool if we had this little piece. And another thing is, you know, it's very important, as I said, in revenue generating, but I think on a very small scale, that there is some green spaces we need to bring in around the city itself. I think that as we grow and build the city center, and as we do that infill, that it's going to be important for us to find areas for, and not the size of our government, but find areas for small parks and the ability for us to have green spaces.
Thank you very much. We'll move down the table to Katie Nash.
Well, I think I've touched on sort of my vision for growth and how, you know, I think that how we've done things in the past has not worked. You know, talking more about the infrastructure bank and how I vision, you know, us going forward. I think, you know, annexations are going to happen. It doesn't matter if it happens with us or it happens with, you know, the future board. It's going to happen. And so we have to look at how we not only look at annexation, but how we look at our infrastructure and what does that mean? You know, water and sewer, we're good for a while. Okay, we've got enough water and sewer for a while, but certainly our road structure, it is failing. It is not working correctly, and anyone who, you know, is anywhere from 3:30 to 6:30 at night understands if you're in Frederick City, you're stuck. Okay, so we need to look at things and certainly have an innovative approach, learn from other cities, learn from other jurisdictions, and clearly, you know, set the rules of engagement for developers. You know, developers, it's easy to say, oh, they're so bad, they're so this, but they're business people, and quite frankly, they just want the rules, and they want the rules to be consistent. So long-term planning, certainly, strategic planning, how we want to grow as a city, and what we want our city to look like, and those rules can be very clear-cut, and they can adhere to them accordingly. So, you know, as I look forward to, you know, a city with infill, like Dave mentioned, I think, you know, I live on the West End. I live sort of very close to the Connolly Farm. I'm not necessarily opposed to Connolly Farm, but or the development that's slated to go there, but I will say that as someone who uses that road, I'm looking forward to, you know, the road before the houses are built. So certainly different from the way we do things now, but we can do things better.
Thank you very much. We'll now move down the table to Jill King.
With the annexations that are coming and in place now, we need to make sure that there's proper infrastructure in place and that we can create contracts with the developers and with the businesses and let them help us to pay for our needs moving forward. The police need a substation out in the Hillcrest area. If Hargett Farm is determined to be developed, that's something to ask the developer for. That would be a great location. It's important that we work with developers, that we create businesses, that we're not just building residences because we can't pay our bills on residential citizens alone. We need the business infrastructure here to work along with the community and to gain their value and safety and jobs and transportation needs. Everything that is needed can be worked on together as a community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now to Mr. Imhoff.
Thank you. As far as annexations go, between what the current administration has done in their annexations and what the previous administration did in their annexations, we have enough land to grow for the foreseeable future. What is the foreseeable future? 4 to 10 years. What we need to do is take what we've been annexed and make sure that we get the road system, the water and sewer systems, the school systems, all the subsequent stuff that you have to do to support those annexations in. Most of it's done by the developers, but the city still has some obligations on its own. One of the things I want to point out is the time frame for some of these support structures. It was announced last night, and you've probably read it in the papers before, we have $82 million from the state to build an interchange on US 15 from Monocacy Boulevard and Christopher's Crossing. Anybody want to guess when that was first on the state highway map? 1958, 55 years ago. So when you're dealing with the state, it takes a while to get things done. So what the city did in a previous administration, and probably others as well, is we have to take by the bull by the horns and do it ourselves. Monocacy Boulevard over Carroll Creek is one example of a city-funded, not state or county-funded, project. So that's what we need to do, is prioritize our CIP to accommodate the annexations that we already have in place.
Thank you. We now move on to Mr. Duke.
Thank you, Cliff. I was reading in the strategic plan that was, the proclamation that was approved by the Mayor and Board on the 18th of July, and I have to give them a lot of credit for this. I used to chair the Human Relations Commission, and we were just sort of like a fish out of water until we got our strategic plan, until we got our vision. So there's one part that says, be it resolved that the planning horizon of the strategic plan will be at least 5 years. So we want to know where we want to be, what our city wants to look like. We need to plan 5, 10, 15, 20 years out. We certainly agree that our infrastructure needs to be in place, that if you're going to develop, the infrastructure needs to be there. That's a given. Now, we've talked about the roads, and Katie and everyone else who's mentioned it is so right. I drive from State Farm down to Carrollton, and if you hit every green light at the right time, it's good. If you're out on the west end and you hit every red light as you know you're going to, it can be a bit rough. So, and when we plan for this, when we plan for the growth, we not only need to plan for the automobile growth, we have to realize that so many of our employees who are fortunate and blessed enough to not only live in the city, but work in the city, don't always drive to work. Sometimes they bicycle. I like the bicycle lanes that I've been seeing. We need more of them. We need more walking paths for people to walk. So it's a very holistic way that we need to take a look at this. And it doesn't need to be smart growth, I'll be honest. I don't like that term. It needs to be intelligent growth. The infrastructure needs to be there. We need to be smart about this. And we need to be visionary about this. Where are we going to be 50 years? What do we want the city of Frederick to look like? And let's move back and let's see where we are today and then go from there.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Dacey.
Well, I've talked a lot about development growth. That's really what I'm talking a lot about. I was on the zoning board for the last 4 years, so I got to see a lot of this in action. I think the city needs to take a look at its infill policies. We need to be more friendly with our infill policies with developers. There's a reason that Elevation Burger and some of those shops are going up at Clemson Corner and not on East Street, and I think honestly we need to take a look at that, and the code needs to be a lot more friendly for infill development to welcome those companies to places where there are vacancies within the current city, you know, within the developed city already. I've talked about upzoning on Route 40. I think that if we can straighten out that intersection there at Bachman's Lane and Route 40 and 15, I think upzoning would be something to definitely take a look at. I think right now that area is being underutilized and underserved. I think with its proximity to Fort Detrick and the high quality jobs that are at Fort Detrick and the doctor's offices and the medical facilities that are coming, based on BRAC, that we could have, we're missing an opportunity there to promote that area for support type jobs for Fort Detrick. So anyway, I think I'm not going to repeat myself since I've talked so much about infrastructure. Infrastructure is key, I think, to the future of Frederick. Suburban tract housing is not the future of Frederick. We need to make sure we get mixed use development, and I think the next 4 years is critical to that end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sidley. And finally, Mr. Cowell.
All the other candidates are right on. The city is growing at a rapid pace. It's a very desirable city to live in. That's why I chose to come back here after college. We have a number of large farms that were annexed into the city within the last year. Infrastructure is going to be key. Safety is key. Residents in certain neighborhoods don't feel safe with their kids running down the street or playing on the sidewalk. My wife and I, we have a dog, 2 Scottish Terriers. One of the terriers was struck by a car in Tuscany. We live in Whittier. So with Kemp Lane, which is on the west side of Fort Detrick, that's going to be a couple hundred homes there. So we need to look at smart widening of those roads with the State Highway Administration in the county. Make sure that there's sufficient bicycle paths, there's sufficient sidewalks for people to feel safe. We also need to have a more comparable tax bracket for the businesses. We're losing businesses to the county, outside the state, and if we can keep our tax bracket more favorable, we're going to bring more businesses into the city. Infill was touched on earlier. There are properties that are empty in downtown Frederick, and we can court businesses once we have a more favorable tax bracket. But overall, I think we need to consider the safety of the citizens with the new building of these large tract neighborhoods. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I've already cut you off there. I apologize.